Hello. The program that you're about to watch is presented by the Online Academy of the Integrative Law Institute at Commonweal. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you to the third of a series of 5 conversations about making collaborative divorce visible. And today I'm talking with Cynthia Chandler, who is the director of the Bay Area Legal Incubator. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thanks for having me.
How are you this morning?
Good.
Well, I'm going to begin by introducing myself very briefly. I'm the co-founder and the first president of IACP, the International Academy of Collaborative Professionals. And I am the founder of the Integrative Law Institute at Commonweal. Our mission is to reclaim law as a healing profession and collaborative divorce practices at the heart of our work. The reason is because divorce is the most common reason why people will encounter the legal system on the civil side. The purpose of these 5 webinars is to give you ideas and tools for making collaborative divorce much more visible in our community and in our cultures as the first thought that every person should have when divorce arises as a concern. For 30 years now, we've been doing collaborative law and collaborative divorce team practice, and we've been talking mostly to ourselves as an international community, building our skills, our ethical standards, our best practices. A person who's facing divorce will often go to a wise counselor of some sort for a suggestion about what kind of professional help to get, often a CPA or a minister or a priest or a business colleague. Most of those referral sources do not know that we exist, even referral sources who are in our very own professions, and that's not acceptable anymore. So my goal is for you to leave this and all of the 5 webinars excited and well-equipped to go out in an organized way in your communities and educate people about why collaborative divorce matters so much and why they should never be sending their clients, friends, or family members anywhere except to a collaborative divorce professional. So, I'm going to introduce Cynthia more fully in a minute, but we're going to talk about the convergent needs of the collaborative practice movement and her work in the legal incubator movement, where Cynthia is. We're going to talk about convergent goals and interests and how we in the collaborative community can connect with them to make our own community more diverse and to start a better job of meeting the legal needs of underserved communities. Now, you're probably all Zoom pros by now during this pandemic, but if you haven't already done so, first of all, I think your microphones are muted, but if not, do that. Secondly, go to the chat box, if you will, and would you please let us know where you're coming in from, where you are right now, and what your profession is. We would love to know that, and we would love to hear from you during the webinar with your questions and your comments. The way to do that is not with the chat function, but rather with the question and answer function, which you'll see 2 icons to the left of your chat function on most screens. So if you'll go there, please, we encourage and really want you to ask any question that might arise as I'm talking with Cynthia. It's also possible, we weren't able to work it out very well with Zoom until now, but I think we've worked out how you can upvote questions that are posted. Keep an eye on that question and answer screen. There should be, underneath each question and to the left, a little thumbs up icon. That's how you friend that question. And if you do that, it moves the question to the top, and Cynthia and I can talk about the things that everybody's most interested in. We'll spend about a half an hour with each other. Then we'll turn to your questions and answers, and we plan to end after roughly 45 minutes, in any event less than an hour. At the end of the webinar, go back to that chat column and give us some feedback. Is this useful to you? Does this touch on needs that you have? And then after the webinar is over, we've had some technical problems about letting people have the access link to the recorded webinar, but I think we solved it. You'll look for an email coming in after the webinar ends, for where you and your colleagues can go to access the on-demand recorded webinar. Now, Cynthia. Cynthia is a force of nature. Cynthia graduated from Harvard Law School, after which she went to Cambridge University in England, where she earned a master's of philosophy in criminology. And since then, she's worked tirelessly as a social justice activist in a broad range of issues, including women's health, racial justice, prisoners' rights, and she's received more awards than we can talk about this morning. A major documentary film is just about to be released in the fall about her work with women in prisons, and the producers are aiming for Oscar nominations, so look for that. She is now working as the first director of the Bay Area Legal Incubator. Its nickname, I want you to pronounce the nickname, Cynthia.
We go between Bali and Bali. Either one works.
I like Bali because it reminds me of palm trees, and that's always nice.
Absolutely.
Here, the incubator admits a new class, which includes both brand new lawyers and also more seasoned lawyers who are making a major career change. And Cynthia's work is coaching and supporting them to build solo practices in underserved communities. So now, Cynthia, tell us about incubators. What are they? What do they do?
Sure. So the incubator movement, and it's called a movement, launched about 10 years ago, but has had much more growth in the last 4 to 5 years. And the idea is to create business coaching communities for people who are new to being solos, solo practitioners, to help them figure out not only how to practice law and be a solo, also how to specifically build viable law businesses serving middle income people. So the movement wanted to address the justice gap, meaning serving people who make too much money to qualify for free legal services through most pro bono programs, and who make way too little to feel comfortable hiring a full-priced lawyer with today's high legal fees, right? Which is, I always say, basically 99% of people who don't feel like they can shell out, hundreds and hundreds of dollars every hour for some unknown number of hours. So my job is to coach up folks on how they can use efficiency technologies, how they can have a really client-centered law practice, how they can have a low overhead and also serve that population in a way that's respectful and provides an incredible value. And I should say the other goal of the incubator movement originally was to help new graduates find a place in the field. That's shifted a little bit, although maybe it will be coming back to that with COVID-19 and new graduates coming into a whole new world in the legal sphere. It's shifted a little bit to have more of a focus on new solos in general. And honestly, even with this COVID moment, I'm getting a lot of practitioners who have practiced quite a while, but who are realizing they have to totally shift what they're doing to survive in this new marketplace. So anyway, that's what we do. And the Bay Area Legal Incubator is a collaborative project between the Alameda County Bar Association in Oakland, California, its nonprofit offshoot, and 5 California law schools, including one, Concord Law, that's a fully virtual school. So we take attorneys who are serving disenfranchised from the legal system clients, which is defined in many different ways throughout California, but our attorneys are not necessarily even in California. I have one attorney in Bangkok, and I have one attorney in New York City. I have another one in Florence, Italy. So we also do a lot of coaching and community building virtually, which has served us well now that many things have moved online, right?
So the collaborative divorce movement is a graying movement mostly, and it's a white group mostly. So I would like you to describe from a diversity perspective, who's in your incubator?
Sure. So it was my dream with building the incubator that it would become a home to really diverse attorneys and provide a diversity pipeline into the legal profession so that people could find a footing for having a successful practice who maybe would have been pushed out of more mainstream white dominant culture. And I didn't even need to work at it. That's what it's been from the beginning, frankly. We have trained up over 60 attorneys. Our incubator is 4 years old. And of that 60, about 1/3 are immigrants, another third are the children of immigrants. It's majority people of color. They collectively speak, of all the folks who've been in the program, they represent 12 different languages. And 45% are somewhere on the LGBTQIA spectrum. Interestingly, 25% are people who identify as living with a disability that affects their life on a daily basis. It's been an incredible resource and value for diverse attorneys, again, who have found it difficult to find a community, a supportive community, and who maybe have not fit in other realms of the legal sphere in order to, and have found that community so they can really flourish. So that's been a big focus of my work, is then to figure out how do I support that diversity of attorneys and what is different about that than might be custom in the legal profession.
So that leads directly to what I wanted to ask you, which is what kind of services and support do you give, and what's the place of training and mentoring particularly?
Yeah, so in-house, because so I am an attorney, I've practiced for over 25 years, but I can't possibly know substantive law in every area that people are practicing in. So to the extent that I do, I provide coaching on that. Primarily my job is providing business coaching, crisis management coaching, because one of the benefits of being in a community rather than on your own as a lawyer is having a community that can help you problem solve when things get very challenging, as well as leadership development and figuring out how people can grow and start delegating and growing their business. And then I outsource substantive law coaching. And I'm always looking for communities and opportunities that can provide supportive coaching of new practitioners so that folks can, either tool up or further develop their skills in the substantive area, and also, frankly, learn best practices of how to, best serve clients and best be a member of the bar.
Well, from that description, you know that for several years now, I've been trying to figure out with you how the collaborative community and its needs and mission and concerns can connect and collaborate with the incubator movement, and specifically, because I'm here and you're here, with Bally. And it would seem to me, I'm going to just describe for a minute, you know this, but maybe our participants don't. It seems to me that family law would be an almost ideal career niche for that population that you described in the incubator. And not just family law generally, but specifically collaborative law, collaborative practice, because for one thing, the collaborative community itself has a huge amount, I would think, to offer to new solos, because your people, like ours, are value-driven, and your people are looking for a meaningful, sustainable, values-driven career path. And what we've got as a worldwide community are people who have mostly turned away from what they were taught to do in order to create something, a way of working that has mission, purpose, that's respectful, socially important, creative. And in addition, the way that collaborative practice has evolved, we have very learnable, teachable roadmaps and protocols. We have spontaneously an infrastructure of local practice groups who are colleagues that meet regularly, specifically to build trust relationships, to improve skills. So mentoring would be automatic. It's baked into the cake because we do casework on interdisciplinary teams, and we debrief every single meeting in order to learn. And yet, I've mentored several of your people when I've come and done programs. They've wanted to have more about collaboration. I've arranged for some of them to go to trainings for free or to conferences for free. And yet they haven't picked up the ball. They're not here anymore. Why? What's going wrong here?
So overarching issues. I mean, one is that despite the enormous demand for family law and the reality that it can be, for sure, a business realm in which one knows there's a demand, right? I mean, it's a little bit easier to do marketing and there's a huge demand. Despite that, family law has a reputation, this is general, as being a horrible field to work in, as taking an enormous emotional toll on the practitioners, of causing folks to have to, sort of hang out in the sadness, and bear witness to incredible levels of sadness on a day-to-day basis. So overall, I have a hard time getting folks even interested in family law because of the fears. And I think that collaborative practice addresses a lot of that, right? Like it's a program design, it's a design to help practitioners have a better life. There also is the fact that I would say newer, younger attorneys really want to have impact for sure. They also really want to have control over their lives. Most millennials and Generation Z, now attorneys who are starting to graduate, have literally never known anyone who has a pension. They don't have any sense or understanding of how any corporation might treat employees well, and they have a really strong sense that they have to forge their own path, or they won't be able to, if they want to have any luck at having a quality of life that they enjoy. And again, I think collaborative law could help with that. And it's an awareness issue of really making it clear that this is a way that they could really truly run a practice, that they would be supported in running a practice, that it would be lucrative, that they also would be able to breathe as a practitioner, right? And that is in fact what people are looking for. I think that in terms of, then when we start getting into the minutia of folks who I've referred on to trainings and things, some folks have been intimidated by the both by, I think, the age and the experience of the community. I'm wondering if it's really possible to jump into collaborative practice as a newer practitioner. And I think, I don't think that they don't, for sure they understand that the system is flawed. For sure, folks that I've referred in understand that our legal system is completely inadequate and oftentimes violent towards families. So it's not the premise that they need to understand. They totally get that. What there seems to be is like concern with how do they enter this community? How can they find their bearings in the community? How welcome do they feel? Even if they are in fact welcomed, how do they feel that they're welcomed? And some things I think might be helpful for the collaborative practice family to think about is, what would it look like to create almost like a barrister's community, a younger practicing community within it? What kinds of social, cultural, and professional community systems need to be put in place so that folks feel like they're immediately embraced, not just welcomed, but actually embraced into the community, and pulling down those barriers. Go ahead.
If I can interrupt for a second, because there's a lot that we want to elaborate on about what you're saying, but I am still stuck at this idea that the collaborative community, which I know as the most amazing place in the legal profession, a place where lawyers hug each other and are nice to each other, and where mental health professionals actually want to be in our company, which is, there's no place else like this. And yet you told me, and it took my breath away. You said that the people who have in your incubators come in expressing interest in family law and who have been enthusiastic about finding out more about collaboration, every single one of them within 6 months said, I would rather have a soulless job where I just go in and punch the clock and get a paycheck than do this for another day. How is that? What's going on?
It's interesting. I mean, it's the building a business, as I'm sure many of folks watching this know, is its own really hard work. And then when you take really a field like family law, which is not necessarily rocket science, it's not the most complex arguments that have to be made, and sometimes there's a lot of patterns, right? But it's so emotionally hard that when you take that and put those two things, which are really hard and sort of bare your soul kind of work, and put them together, I've had a lot of folks who are just like, you know what, I'm just going to go off, work for a firm, build up my skills, not worry about the business piece, just do this, or maybe leave family law altogether. And so what I've started thinking is, if there were a more formal way to say, hey, through incubators, folks can get the business coaching and support you need, and and like people coming in with this awareness, it's sort of advertised before people come in. And in collaboration with the collaborative divorce community, you can get this mentoring and things in substantive law. Like these two communities are willing to embrace people and pull them in. And I think that if we approach people, because what's else, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little, but what also is happening is people are, before they're hearing about collaborative law, there are ready opportunities and sort of mentors available who practice more traditional family law practice, right? So,
Absolutely.
and that's easy and it seems more normal. And so folks will dive into those training opportunities and they get so burnt that then when I'm like, you're so burnt, 6 months in, you're still a baby at this and you're already emotionally burnt. Let's have you start working and doing collaborative law. Let's have you switch instead of giving up what you've learned for 6 months. Let's have you switch over. Folks are so exhausted even then that they're just like, I'm not learning anything new. I'm just not even learning anything new. And
well,
so
I want to just go back to something that you told me that really struck me on this point, because what you've been telling me is that even though we in the collaborative movement see ourselves as having a wide open door to one of the best places where you can be and still be practicing law, that's really who we as a community know ourselves, because we're in it and that's what we do experience with one another. But you're telling me that even though the door is open, people are not experiencing a welcoming community. They're not experiencing, once they're in that room, that it's a place that they want to be. And you added to this that these are, you talked to me about how in the incubator itself, which is, again, designed to be the most supportive environment possible, a level of kindness and collegiality is required that's almost staggering to me to envision. That you have to throw people out who even have a bit of an edge with one another. And you connected it, in explaining it to me, you connected it with some of the characteristics of a very culturally, racially, economically diverse millennial population and an imposter syndrome. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so certainly our incubator, and there's a couple of other incubators in the country, certainly the Texas incubator, which is, its acronym is TOJI, and then which is statewide, and then also the Los Angeles Incubator Consortium. Our 3 incubators tend to be the most diverse, and all 3 of us, the folks who run them, have found that our attorneys identify with having imposter syndrome, meaning that even when you look objectively through a lens, not to themselves, but outsiders looking objectively at folks' skill and capacity, they tend to underestimate what they're capable of doing and have a lot of a sense of insecurity and inferiority. And that probably is related to being a legal profession that encapsulates and promotes a level of institutional oppression. And, we spend a lot of time helping people unlearn a sense of not being entitled to even be at the table, not being that it's weird that they're even there, and feeling like outsiders before they're ever even judged on anything. So one of the things for that I require in my incubator community is that people treat each other in a nonviolent way, with nonviolent communication, that people are there to support one another and are open and willing to have frank conversations with one another. And when people violate that, and I've had lots of things happening, it can even be things of, I had a group of male attorneys in the incubator who were referring to every woman that they came in contact with, even if they were a mentor that they were working with who was 35 years their senior, they were referring to all of them as girls. Right? Like that's just not okay. And when I challenged one of them on it, he's like, well, I hear judges do that all the time. And I'm like,
oh Lord.
Okay. And if a judge were to use a racial slur, you should not do that, right? And he was like, and he was a man of color, and he was like, oh yeah, no, I wouldn't do that. So, I literally had to make a rule in our handbook that if people were of adult majority age, you could not refer to them as boys and girls, right? But
okay, of course, so let me stop you there, because going back about 3 or 4 ticks, you were describing the atmosphere that is essential in an incubator.
Yeah.
The ways of treating one another, nonviolent communication, open, frank, transparent conversations.
Yeah.
This is our stock in trade.
I know.
I mean, every time we have this conversation, and it's been more than once, we realize that we're doing the same thing and aiming for the same qualities of practice. And so we also know, because you've told me to my shock, that the open door that we think that we've got and the come on in that we think we're offering doesn't feel like that to young millennials of color in your incubators, and then probably others who aren't in your incubators.
Yeah.
What do we have to do to fix that, number one, and how do we do it? How do we connect with the incubator movement? Because you've said they're looking for niches that are like this.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking for mentoring and training. We are that niche. We offer mentoring and training every day of the week in the work, as well as more structured and formal. How do we fix this?
I think that one simple solution or a strategy could be if one of your associations wanted to sort of sponsor a formal fellowship track for incubator attorneys and promoted it. And I would be willing to help host a national conversation between collaborative lawyers as well as incubators across the country.
The leaders of the incubators, like
and the leaders of the incubators.
And there are about 80 of them in the United States alone, right?
At least 80. More of them keep popping up.
Okay.
So and we have a listserv, right? So I can easily host a conversation through Zoom, right? With folks. I think that if there was an interest in establishing sort of like a formal fellowship, which what it offered was acceptance into one of the local communities of attorneys doing your kind of work and training, and the specific people were identified. And within that description of the fellowship was an encouragement that you're seeking to diversify the base of attorneys in your movement on many different realms, race, age, gender, sexual orientation, immigration status, whatever it is. Like, if you're increasing diversity and having a real commitment to that, I think that would incentivize people to, right from the get-go of building their practice, think about that as an option. And part of it is, if you're not a white professional, and if you have felt ostracized in the legal community, you're going to be looking for people who actually label that fact and transparently are trying to amend it, like articulating that, we see this diversity issue, we want to start shifting it, and these are the things we're doing to make it so. And one of those things is providing a wealth of mentoring and systems support, and as well as collegiality. I think that would be incredibly rare in the legal community and well received.
So what I'm hearing, if tell me if I've got it right, that you'd be willing to facilitate a kind of conversation at a national level with a great number of incubator leaders. And on our side, it could include leaders at all levels, from local to state to regional to national to international, as many different kinds of leaders in the collaborative practice movement as we could bring to the table. It could be on Zoom, and that could be a conversation like this one, I guess, in which ideas are floated and people make commitments to try out ideas at different levels. And the specific idea you've given us is fellowships. And I'm thinking that also could happen at the international level through the International Academy of Collaborative Professionals. There could be an annual fellowship or two specifically for non-represented people who we need in our community and they aren't there yet. A message says, we want you so much, we're giving these fellowships. And then at the state and regional level, or at the national level, because we've got a lot of different countries in our movement as well, there could be a very prestigious fellowship for this purpose. And down at the local level, right here in the Bay Area, there are maybe 8 different practice groups in the various counties. Each one of them could work with a specific incubator. And I don't know how much money they can come up with, because we're like the pediatricians of the legal profession, but certainly there would be ways to provide support and inclusion, a free membership in the practice group, maybe some kind of support within the incubator. But that conversation is the one that you and I think could happen next.
Yeah, I think that could happen next, and I think it could be very fruitful. And certainly if I knew that the following package was available, then as I'm recruiting people even into the incubator, I can make that known, right? And you could have directors of incubators all over doing the same thing. And just be clear, the incubator movement started in the US, but it's been spreading internationally. So there's incubators popping up all over. I literally yesterday afternoon, I was on a conversation with a French legal technology company executive who's spreading to the US. And he was telling me there's now 15 legal incubators in France. I had no idea that there are incubators in France. So they're popping up across the world. And so it makes sense to have these two movements, collaborate.
It's so obvious to me that I'm incredibly frustrated, and now I am understanding where this frustration lives. It is about diversity, inclusion, and social justice. Duh, everything is. And we're trying to look at ourselves and understand what we're doing that's causing it not to work, and you're giving us a kind of a pathway. And one last thing that you mentioned when we talked about these ideas for a national conversation or international conversation between the two movements is that maybe out of that would come an idea for a model program with an incubator that was really fired up about doing it, and a collaborative community at whatever level that was really fired up about doing it, that they could work together, create a model collaboration, and then out of that could be spread in both movements.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have an annual incubator conference, for example, and I'm usually part of the planning committee for the program. And if there was such a model, for sure, that could be something that could be featured in one of the national conferences those conferences are about training the trainers. So basically training the incubator leads and coaching new attorneys. So if there were a model like that, people would be very thirsty for that kind of information. It would be, yeah, for sure.
I'm scanning through our chat list, and I'm seeing people from Italy, Brazil, Canada, United States, Italy, New Orleans, Dallas, all over the place. We got people all over the place on this conversation. So we could start something good right here.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, now that more and more folks are working virtually, the Texas incubator and my incubator, Valley, in the San Francisco Bay Area, we started coaching people virtually before COVID. Now, almost every incubator is having to coach people and think about how to do supportive people virtually. I've just taken my first participant on who wanted business coaching and who doesn't want the substantive law coaching, for example. But there's if you had folks that were interested in working with collaborative lawyers in a place where there was not an incubator, there are potentially partners globally now through incubators that could help bring people in and provide the business support that they need while getting the substantive law and practice tips through your movement.
And I wanted to definitely mention and remind both of us and those who are joining us that IACP, it's controversial, and I'm not going to talk more about the controversy about it, but IACP during the pandemic has temporarily suspended a couple of the standards for trainings and trainers now through, I think, February or March of 2021. The requirement for a basic training at international standards in how to do this work is 14 hours sequential in person of training. But the suspension of that rule means that trainings at the basic level, the incoming in the door level, can now be done virtually online, and they can be chunked into much smaller bits, like say 2 hours a week, something like that. And that to you was really appealing. And you had mentioned something about being able to have a national or international virtual training with incubator participants.
Mm-hmm.
Would that conceivably be something that could be discussed?
Yeah, definitely. And I want to say there's one comment in the Q&A by a woman, Tanya, who says that she's, as a Black woman, been very embraced, and that's awesome. What I would say is, what I would love to know is how do I communicate that message out to other diverse attorneys so that they know about the welcoming nature of the community? And that is fabulous and great. And I want more people to know that, because I have folks who are turning away from family law that I don't think would if they knew that they had that supportive environment. So that's awesome.
Gretchen Wallaker is asking a really cogent question. She says she loves the conversation and the difference between welcoming and embracing, and asks, how can we in the collaborative community do better at embracing? And do we need training, and where would we get it?
I know, like one of the attorneys that I sent off into the collaborative world, after she went to one of the conferences, came back and said, the mental health professionals at the conference all talked to her and she found them really easy to connect with, and she didn't connect with any lawyers, which was interesting to me. I don't know if that was just a random pod of people who were having a bad day that she happened to be sitting next to. It could have been completely random. And it also, every community, I think, literally every community, I say this about the one that I'm building at Valley, also always needs to look at how to receive people even more affirmatively, right? And certainly, like, making, especially if you're dealing with generational divides, making sure that newer attorneys know that they have a community within those associations, and that they have, their own sense of camaraderie, has proven to be effective for bar associations nationally that regularly have barristers communities, right? They have them for a reason, because younger attorneys sometimes find it easier to learn from one another as peers, and to help to hold and support each other. And so I guess that's the kind of thing I would like to see also in the collaborative divorce world, is how can there be more attention to creating that sort of sub-community so that folks feel held wherever they are.
Yeah, we can easily do that at the international level. We have an annual meeting, and this year it'll be virtual. Usually it's in person, but it seems now that you mention it that it's obvious we should have a young collaborators division, and that it should have its own events at the annual forum where they can come to know one another and build their own sub-community. Is that sort of what you mean?
Yeah, I wonder if that would help. That's certainly that specific person that I'm talking about who had that experience. I think that if there had been a way to meet other younger attorneys in that space, that would have been helpful. And also, I want to acknowledge part of it could have been that person feeling intimidated talking to the professionals, the attorneys that she was looking up to on some level, right? So the question is, how do you help folks who might be intimidated?
So Tanya O'Connor says local practice groups can be more proactive and intentional about diversity. For example, a group of trainers in Canada are offering scholarships for collaborative training for young minority attorneys interested in the collaborative movement. Perfect example.
Perfect, absolutely right, yeah.
And we have not done that in any organized, systemic way, even though we are so organized. Organization at every level seems to come naturally to us. We have all of this infrastructure, and we need to turn ourselves to using it for inclusion and welcoming purposes. I think what I'll do now, I'm going to screen share just for a minute. Cynthia has been kind enough to give us a beautiful list of resources and links. I guess just before I do that, we can't stop talking without you telling people about Fred Rooney, and then you should do that while I'm screen sharing.
What do I say about Fred Rooney? Well, so Fred Rooney is considered the godfather of the incubator movement. He launched the first legal incubator, first or second, there's actually some arguments over that, but collegially, out of CUNY in New York City. And he has, after he left there, he's sort of been evangelizing this concept of legal incubators throughout the world. And so he takes the idea of incubators to different places around the world, and trains communities on how they can build legal incubators. And sometimes they're through the legal community, and sometimes they're through social justice communities. where they want attorneys in their community. So for example, he worked with a group of Romani activists to create a Romani incubator to train up attorneys to specifically from that community to stay in and serve that community. Anyway, he connected Pauline and me, and is always trying to figure out ways that incubators can be used to help a diversity of attorney communities as well as social justice communities.
So he would be a natural keynote speaker at the IACP annual forum, I would think. You think?
If he's also ridiculously humble about speaking engagements, but yes, I do. I think that he would be good. And I also think, you know, he was a family law practitioner for a number of years as well. And I can't even imagine that he wouldn't think that the work that you all are doing is spectacular and incredibly important for the world.
Now I've got the resources slide up on the screen just for another minute. You can take screenshots of it, but I'm also going to send it out to everybody after the webinar is over. And I'm going to stop screen sharing in a moment so we can go back to the chat window. I'm going to stop sharing now. Don't worry, you'll get it anyway afterward. But if you all would go to your own chat panel and let me get what I need up here. We really would like to have some feedback from you about this webinar. We'd like to know whether this is useful, whether you're planning to have your colleagues watch it, whether you've been inspired with any ideas from this that you're going to take and run with. Thank you, Tanya.
There's a comment from Monica regarding how, you know, it might be really beneficial to bring the collaborative law community to students through law schools. And I was an associate dean of law career development at California Law School, and I agree. It's been a source of frustration for many people looking at how to increase representation options in family law, that family law is not more central in terms of a career option that's promoted to students in general in law school. Given that law schools give very little attention to family law as a practice option in general, it's very ripe. It's very, very ripe to think about just pushing ahead and getting collaborative practice featured there.
We've been working on that very hard, but
awesome.
as my next conversation with Ross Foote, he'll probably say this, but he told me that among the judiciary, and it's the same in law school, family law is the dirty diapers of the legal profession. And isn't that vivid? Nobody wants to touch it. It's not why they went to law school. And we swim upstream about that, but not all law school deans are like that. David Hoffman gives a course at Harvard, and Madeline Landrieu at Loyola Law School in New Orleans is hugely interested in the collaborative movement. We've got to find those people.
I also want to throw out there that right now, when there's so many people who are kind of in limbo with not being able to take bar exams at all, there is such a big push on the part of law schools to find content and opportunities for those people to feel connected into the practice of law, since they're having to wait so much longer before they can even sit for the bar. And it might be a really interesting opportunity to think about how, if there was need for non-licensed helpers from practitioners, you know, it might be an interesting way to introduce collaborative law to different law school communities, to offer to train up and provide some sort of opportunities to recent grads who are not yet able to sit for the bar.
Really good suggestion, Cynthia, among a wealth of good suggestions. And I think there are some more questions and comments. We'll finish with that, and then we're going to say goodbye. So Elisabetta Valentini from Italy, she says family law in Italy is called the Cinderella of law. That's a better way to put it than dirty diapers. Let's see what else we've got here. A lot of enthusiasm about picking up your suggestions and running. Monica Wallace talks about law schools' focus on advocacy in the courtroom and pedagogy, reaffirming what you're suggesting about law schools. And I think that's where we should probably wrap it up. I'm so pleased, Cynthia, that you have joined us to talk about this. It couldn't be more timely. And it's so obvious that this convergence needs to happen, that this collaboration has to happen. And I'm going to give the recording to the board of IACP and hope that they decide to run with some of your ideas. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and let me know how I can be helpful. I love how you all have transformed an entire arena of practice, and I can't imagine that it's not going to be, lead to much healthier, more productive lives for many attorneys. So any way I can be helpful, I'd gladly do it.
Thank you. We're going to take you up on that. Take care.
Perfect.
Goodbye to you. Bye to everybody. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for joining us in this recorded program presented by the Online Academy of the Integrative Law Institute at Commonweal, known as ILLI. You'll find many more webinars, video workshops, and conversations on our website. But even better, subscribe to ILLI's YouTube channel for early access to cutting-edge video programming made specifically for conflict resolution professionals. Our programs are either free or priced very affordably, but the production costs run high in both time and money. So if you like this program, please help us produce more high-quality videos like it by making a tax-deductible contribution today to the Integrative Law Institute. Thank you.